How's it going? Adam Drake here, and today I'm going to share some information for rough tracks. So most 8-scale tracks that we race on here in the US start out really smooth, kind of as the race day or race weekend progresses. Depending on the number of entries, it will either start to get a little bit bumpy, or in some cases at some of the bigger races it'll get extremely bumpy. So I'm going to share with you a few things that I do kind of throughout the race weekend to kind of improve the handling in those bumpy conditions. But also remember, because in the US a lot of times the tracks go towards that, our standard or baseline setups are already pretty good when the track gets rough, but in some extreme cases we'll take our standard setup and there's just a few things that we kind of tweak or change. One of the really important things that we use on all of our Mugen vehicles is the MIP Bypass 1 pistons. Those are also available through Flashpoint RC. Those are really good in all conditions, but what they were originally kind of intended for, designed for, is lower grip, bumpy conditions, to be able to change the rebound speed of the shock to help keep the tire on the ground, give it more grip, and be able to accelerate through bumps. So that's one of our kind of standard things that we run. But with the bypass pistons, depending on the track conditions, we change the color valves quite a bit. And what the color valves do is they change the rebound speed. So if it's lower grip and bumpy, usually a thinner valve would be the direction you would want to go. That's going to make the car respond and react a little bit faster, help give it a little bit more grip, and just kind of float over the bumps. If the track is really high speed and bumpy, you have to be a little bit careful to not go too thin with those valves, because if it's rebounding too fast in the higher speed sections, it can cause or make the car want to flip or be a little bit difficult to drive. Typically, I always start with blue rear and clear front, and in most conditions, I will either keep that same balance and go thinner on the valves, so a blue in the front and a green in the rear. But if the track's high speed, I'll keep that blue in the rear and then go to a blue, or in some cases, extreme cases, sometimes even a green in the front. Another thing on the car that I like to change for bumpy conditions would be the pills in the A and the B block. And again, this just depends on how extremely bumpy the track is. In some cases, I'll change just the A. That would be the first thing I would change. If it gets really bumpy, I'll change the A and the B. And what I'll do is I will raise the A up, so adding more kick, which is also going to give the car more overall caster. And then when I go to change the B block, I will lower the pills. So my standard setting is middle in the A and middle in the B, but a lot of times, like at DNC, Silver State, when it gets really rough, I'll go to up in the A block and down in the B block. So that's giving me maximum kick and also a little bit more caster. That is going to reduce some overall steering, but usually when the track's really bumpy, the biggest thing you're wanting to be able to do is position the car where you want and be able to accelerate straight and hard through those bumps. So in most cases, it's worth giving up a little bit of that steering to have the stability through the bumps. Another thing you could do is change the upper front arm spacing. So my standard setup is 2 mil front and rear, so the upper front arm is in the middle. If you take some of the shims from the back, move them to the front. Usually I go 1 mil at a time, but again, if the track gets extremely bumpy and it looks like it's super hard to drive, you could pull both shims from the back, move them to the front, giving the car max caster in the front. Sometimes with that, it can make the car a little bit aggressive on throttle because the extra caster makes it transfer more weight to the back, and sometimes it can almost like overpower the rear end. Just depends on the conditions. But what's really cool with the caster adjustment is you can do it super fast. So if you have just like a spring tool for your exhaust, you can hook it into those clips, move it, go do a couple laps, bring it back in, and either make that adjustment even farther, or if you didn't like that direction, move it back. And then kind of the final thing, I mean, granted, there's tons of adjustments we can make on the car, but these are just kind of some of the key ones that I like to adjust. The last thing would be my center diff, to go to a little bit thinner center diff. And what that's going to do is just kind of smooth out the power delivery. So it's going to give me a little bit more traction on throttle. And it's also going to make it, when the car is going through the bumps, it's going to allow it to kind of bleed a little bit more power. So the front tires will want to kind of balloon a little bit more. And that will just kind of help soften and make the car a little bit easier and smoother through the rough and bumpy conditions. So those are just some of the key things that I like to change on my Mugen vehicles when the track gets rough, and simple changes that you can try at your local track, especially if it's a track that gets bumpy or if it's lower grip. And hopefully this helps you tune your vehicle to get the best results possible.